Hello everyone, my name is Theodor from Market Bike. And this right here is my 2016 Honda MSX 125, or the Honda Grom as it's more commonly known in the US market. Now, I've owned this particular Honda Grom for almost a year now, and I'm extremely happy with my ownership experience, although I am selling it today. So before I let it go, I wanted to record this video for you, show you why I bought it, and show you why this is the perfect bike for you. And if you're thinking about getting one, you should go out and buy one. Now, before we get into the video, I do want to take a moment to thank this channel sponsor, and that's you. Thank you for getting this channel to 4,000 subscribers. It really means a lot to me. Thank you for supporting the channel, liking, subscribing, and watching the video until the end, because it really helps the algorithm. So thank you so much, and let's get back to the video. Let me tell you the story about how I came to own my Honda Grom last year. So back in 2016, when I was just getting my motorcycle license, I saw videos of the Honda Grom. I really liked it, and I wanted to get one, and I remember telling my dad all about it. And 7 years later, last year, when I saw a listing for this one, I knew I had to have it. And 7 years later, it was exactly as much fun as I envisioned it to be, to have one, ride it around, and just enjoy the experience. So let's start off with what this tiny thing actually is. The Honda Grom started production back in 2013 as part of Honda's Mini Moto series of bikes. And in this lineup, you can find bikes such as the Honda Navi, the Honda Trail, the Honda Monkey, or this, the 125cc Honda Grom. Now, when the Grom first came out back in 2013, it looked quite a bit different than what mine looks like right here. It had a halogen headlight up front instead of this beautiful LED one, and here we even have a separate part for the high beam, and there's also a really nice blue strip right here, which kind of reminds you of the laser lights on some higher end BMWs. The fairings were completely different all around the bike. They were much more rounded and egg-shaped, unlike on my bike right here, where you could probably cut yourself on these fairings if you look at them the wrong way. And the exhaust was really different. It was mounted really high right here below the passenger seat, unlike right here on mine where it's mounted right below the passenger foot peg. Also, the seat used to be very flat, unlike here where you have two very distinct levels, as if you're ever going to have a passenger with you on one of these. And the reason why it looks so different is because in 2016, which is this model year, the Honda Grom received a facelift. In the enthusiast community, the 2013 to 2015 models are referred to as the OG Grom, while this right here from 2016 to 2020 is referred to as the SF Grom. And the reason why I say facelift instead of model update is because, other than the cosmetic changes which I just outlined, the bike mostly stayed the same mechanically. The suspension stayed the same, the wheels stayed the same, and even the engine stayed the same. And while we're on the topic of the Honda Grom's engine, here are the specifications. It's a single piston 125cc engine. It's a 4-stroke, fuel injected, so no carburetors. It has 2 valves, it's air cooled, and it makes a whopping 9.6 horsepower. And trust me, that 0.6 horsepower really makes a big difference. It makes 10.9 newton meters of torque, or 8 foot-pounds at 5,500 RPM. And because the red line is at 10,000 RPM, that means that you do get the torque pretty early on in the power curve. And the result of all of this is a pretty fun riding experience, because the Honda Grom only weighs around 100 kilograms or 220 pounds. And this gives it a pretty good power to weight ratio of around 0.0436 recurring horsepower per pound, which according to Wikipedia is equal to a 2021 Dodge Ram 1500. Now, the 2021 Dodge Ram 1500 does the 0 to 60 somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 seconds, while the Honda Grom does it eventually. In reality, the 0 to 60 figure for the Honda Grom is around 13 seconds, depending on many factors such as the weight of the rider, the slope of the road, the wind direction, the tidal currents, the moon phase. The thing is, the Honda Grom wasn't built for top speed at all, and in fact, it only had 4 gears up until the 2021 model year, and the 5th gear was only added for fuel economy. And this means that even though it accelerates pretty well at low speeds, it takes a really long time to get to those high speeds. The speed of the Honda Grom tops out at around 60 to 65 miles per hour, which translates to around 100 to 110 kilometers per hour. And that's definitely enough for city driving or even country driving, but definitely not for highway driving. The fuel economy is pretty good though, especially compared to a Dodge Ram. The fuel tank on the Honda Grom fits around 5.5 liters of fuel, or around 1.5 gallons. And when you combine that with the fuel consumption of around 2 liters per 100 kilometers, or 120 miles per gallon, gallon. You do get a range of around 250 kilometers or around approximately 155.343 miles before your fuel stop. Now, one really cool quirk of the Honda Grom is the LCD gauge cluster. Here you can see stuff like your fuel level, your RPMs, your speed. You have a digital clock, and you even get 2 trip odometers as well as the main one. You can also change the units from kilometers to miles in less than 30 seconds, which is really useful. For example, if you live in the UK and you go to France often on your bike that can barely do 60 an hour. Yeah. And another really cool touch is that the display lights up blue at night, which looks really cool. And to this day, I have no idea how it knows when it's nighttime and when it's daytime. It's probably based on the moon phase again, or maybe it's just always lit up. You just can't see it during the day. Now, I think it's very cool that a budget motorcycle from 11 years ago has a digital gauge cluster, while some luxury motorcycles of today are still sticking to analog gauges. And I do have to say, I really like the RPM gauge. I love seeing it go from left to right. It's very intuitive, and you always know how close to redline you are. And speaking of redline, let's see how this bad boy sounds. Now, before I start it up, I do have to say that I do have an aftermarket exhaust on it. This is the so-called Amazon exhaust because it's so cheap and so widely available that you can even get it on Amazon. Now, sadly, because Amazon doesn't exist in Serbia, I bought mine off of AliExpress, so I'm not even sure if it's truly an Amazon exhaust. And the total cost of my fake Amazon exhaust came out to around $90, and it still has the baffle in there because I got it stuck in there. So it can be even louder, but because I mostly drive this bike around at redline, I didn't want to be too obnoxious in the city. Anyways, here it goes. There you go, you saw how it sounds. It sounds pretty amazing even for a 125cc. And I do remember a famous motovlogger, Royal Jordanian. He was riding around on a Grom through London, and people were stopping to ask him how big the engine was, and he was telling them it was a liter bike. And some of them actually believed him just because of how good the bike sounds. Now, my Grom doesn't just sound great because of the mods it has, it also looks great. Now, sadly, other than the headlight, which we've already mentioned, not a lot of parts on this bike come as LED. The turn signals, for example, come as halogen, but the previous owner of this bike swapped them with these really cool LED turn signals, which look really amazing, especially compared to the stock halogen ones. And I've also taken the liberty of connecting some wires underneath the headlight to make it so that they're always on. It kind of reminds me of its bigger brother, the Honda Africa Twin, or even some of the new BMW GS models. And it's also really good for safety because, as you can see, when the engine is off, the headlight turns off, and this gives you more visibility at night if someone is coming in front of you. And it's just easier to notice you because of the contrast between the orange turn signals and the red brake light or the blue headlights. And the turn signals still work as normal, so if I put on the right turn signal, it still lights up, so no functionality is lost. The only downside of this is that the turn signal indicators are permanently on in the gauge cluster, but you can solve this by soldering some wires underneath the headlight. I didn't really want to get into that because I didn't want to make it too permanent if the next owner doesn't like it, so they can revert it back to stock. And as you can see, the other LED element stock on this bike is the tail light. Just looks amazing. And right here, even the brake light is pretty well integrated. I love LED brake lights because you can just flash them like this and be really annoying to people behind you. Honda really did an amazing job both with the headlights and the taillights of this bike. Definitely one of my favorites on any bike for sure. And as you can see, the previous owner of this bike also installed this tidy tail, which means we get no mud guard, explaining the really muddy rear seat. And it also comes with an integrated LED license plate light, which means that now all of the lights on this bike are LED, and that means that I don't have to worry about battery drain, stuff like that. Now, on the topic of battery drain, the battery is right here underneath the seat in this storage compartment, and I'm pretty sure it's secured by these factory zip ties, and it has the factory tie text warning you not to open the battery. And right here you can also find this little helmet holder, and here's how it works. It basically only works with helmets that have a double D-ring, so if you've got a really cool AGV K1 like I do right here, what you can do is you can just hook the loops. What the hell? I'm waiting for these guys to move. Right, so all you have to do is just hook the loops through this metal bar right here, and then once you have it in place, all you have to do is put the seat back and your helmet is locked up and protected against theft. And that's not the end of the Grom's practicality features. Something I discovered pretty early on but never actually saw anyone else mention is that right here on the gas tank you have this flap which covers the keyhole for the gas cap. And what you can do is, if you have a grocery bag like this, let's say you put your groceries inside, what you can do is you can just make a small loop on the bag and wrap it around the gas tank flap, and then this is going to stay like this for the duration of your ride. Now the reasoning behind this is because whoever designed this gas tank keyhole cover decided that this metal piece right here should be the sturdiest metal piece on the whole bike. This thing can really hold a lot of weight. I've transported countless things, big or small, and it's just a really amazing feature that truly increases the practicality. I really wonder if this was done on purpose or if some Honda engineer just magically made this flap into the most perfect convex shape to hold your bag. And while we're on the topic of the practicality of the Honda Grom, we do have to acknowledge the fact that this truly is a mini moto. The entire bike is only around 1.365 meters long, or 53.7 inches, or around 2.65 European license plates width-wise, which really is tiny. And just for some comparison, the Suzuki Hayabusa, which is also a motorcycle, is around 1.6 European license plates longer than the Grom, or around 82.5 centimeters, or around 32.5 inches. So it's quite a bit shorter than the competition, but it's also lower than the competition. The seat height on the Grom comes out to around 76.5 centimeters, or around 30.1 inches, which surprisingly isn't that much lower than, for example, the brand new 2024 BMW 1300 GS, which only has an additional 8.5 centimeters, or around 3.4 inches in seat height. Now, I'm around 6'5", around 195 centimeters, and to be honest, I fit quite well on it. When I was first buying the bike, I wasn't expecting to fit on it at all, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't really want to buy it. But honestly, after driving it a lot, it's just really not that bad. I've done many multi-hour road trips on this bike, and it was okay. Plus, you can always slide back on the passenger seat if you need to stretch out, or you can just put your legs like this if you need to stretch your legs. So if you're put off from buying this bike by being too tall, I don't think it's going to be a problem for you. And something else that contributes to the comfort on this bike is the suspension. 31mm air adjustable hydraulic upside down fork. In the front, it's got 31mm air adjustable hydraulic upside down forks, which is just fancy talk for it makes the ride really smooth. And right here in the back, it has a swing arm with a monoshock, which also contributes to the very smooth ride. And because of this, going over speed bumps on this bike is no problem. I can really only remember one time when the suspension bottomed out on me, and other than that, it's really perfect. One thing to note is that for some reason, this almost calcium-like plaque has built up on my rear shock, and while I don't think it affects the ride quality at all, it is a bit of an eyesore. Now, what's not an eyesore at all are these amazingly beautiful wheels of the Grom. These are 13-inch aluminum wheels, both front and rear. In the front, they're 120 width, in the rear 130, and the wheels themselves have this really nice wide design in this beautiful black color. As I said before, these wheels were carried over from the OG Grom, and I can definitely see why. They just look really amazing, especially for a non-serious bike like the Grom. You also get these 90-degree valve stems on the wheels just because of how cramped this area is and how small the wheels are, so you can have an easier time putting air into your tires. And while we're on the topic of tires, I do want to say that these are some of the coolest tires you can get for this motorcycle. These are the Michelin Power Pures, and what's really cool about them is that they're actually made from two different compounds. You've got a hard compound in the middle and then a softer compound on the side, and that's in the middle for longevity and then on the side for more grip and corners. And I've been to Greece, which is a huge motorcycle country, and I've only seen these tires one time on one bike, which just goes to show how exclusive and expensive they are for a bike like this. And the brakes also look very exclusive and expensive on the Grom. You've got double piston in the front, single piston in the rear, and you can see that the brake calipers are this bright red color both front and rear, and they have the Nissin branding right here, which is the manufacturer. And Nissin basically supplies brakes for almost all Honda models like the Africa Twin, and they just look really nice and really expensive, especially in this red color. Something to note about the brakes is that in the later model years of the SF Grom, you could actually specify ABS. Mine doesn't have it. You can see because it doesn't have the ABS sensors on the disc, and it also doesn't have any cable coming off the brake hose to actually sense if the wheel stopped. Now, on a larger bike, I sure would have preferred to have the ABS, but on a small bike like this, I honestly haven't even had a situation that I had to brake so hard to even come close to locking the brakes. So it's not a big deal if you don't have them. And I've ridden this thing a lot. When I first bought the motorcycle, it had around 27,500 kilometers on it. Right now it sits at 31,200 kilometers. So over a period of 10 months, 4 of which were winter, I did 3,700 700 kilometers or around 2,300 miles on this thing. I've taken it on all the roads, through the country, on the highway, through the city. It never even came close to disappointing me, and every single one of those kilometers was just fun, exciting, comfortable, and just truly enjoyable to ride. And another thing that I have to mention is that these Groms, or the MSX 125s, are quite rare here in Europe. Less so in the UK, but in Eastern Europe, like in Serbia where I live, these things are pretty much unheard of. I seriously think that this might be the only SF Honda Grom in Serbia right now, and pretty much everywhere I went with it, people were just astonished and excited to see it, because how often do you get to see a bike for the first time? You know, it's really cool because you show up to a place where there are people with bikes that are 10 times more expensive, and they're all amazed by your 125cc Honda Grom. And one last thing I want to show you before we take the Honda Grom for a ride is just the general build quality and the reliability of it. The whole bike is super simply built, and for me, this is peak Honda engineering, and Honda's really built brand credibility with me with this bike. There's nothing complicated for the sake of being complicated, and for example, all the switchgear on the handlebars is really well made. Right here on the left side, you just have a simple switch for your high beams on and off. You have your horn. Let's do a quick horn check. And you've got your left and right turn signal, pretty satisfying to use. And on the right side, you just have your kill switch and the most satisfying starter button to press in the world. I love pressing this thing. There is also another feature, which is the steering lock. If you turn the handlebars all the way to the left, with just a bit of wiggling, you can actually lock the handlebars, and then no one can steal your motorcycle. That is, of course, unless they can just lift it. No windshield visor, no cruise control, nothing unnecessary on this bike. And this same design philosophy is carried over to pretty much the rest of the bike, especially the engine, which is just super simply built. As I've said before, this bike has done almost 20,000 miles and it still runs great. The only things I've done to it maintenance-wise were I changed the oil myself just out of precaution because I didn't know when it was last changed. It was super simple to do, and it only takes 1 liter of 10W30 oil every 4,000 kilometers or 2,500 miles. I also had the chain and the sprockets replaced because the chain was getting super stretched, and this only cost me around $80 at my local mechanic. And it really improved the rideability of the bike because it removed that delay from when you get on the throttle to when the bike actually starts to go. And some of the other maintenance items are actually also really simple to replace. You could probably do them yourself, like cleaning the oil screen or changing the clutch plates. But I really didn't feel like this bike needed any more service. It runs great as it is, and I really feel that even though this bike has done 20,000 miles, it still has a long way to go before anything major needs to be serviced. So all in all, the cost of ownership in my past year of owning this bike was around $120, or around $200 if you include the exhaust, or around $320 if you include the fuel cost, or around $335 if you also include the tolls I paid. Okay, so now let's start up this Honda Grom and take it for one last beautiful ride. Alright, so I put my Crocs in sport mode for this. Alright, so here we are on that final ride. And the good thing about the Grom is that the clutch is basically optional, so you can upshift clutchlessly. And also downshifting clutchlessly is also an option. You can just hear how great the engine sounds. I just love that sound. And I used to have the baffle off, and it would be so loud. I think at some point you gotta like stop with the 125cc's being that loud. Oh, dude, I'm telling you, this thing is so fun to ride around. You can see that it's pouring wet outside, and I'm still having fun. One thing that I do want to note is that I really have zero problems fitting on this thing. Oh. Zero problems fitting on this thing, and it's just so fun to ride, man. One cool thing is that when the exhaust warms up, you can do the kill switch thing, 5,500 RPM, you kill switch the engine and then it pops, which is something little kids like me like to do to be cool. Yeah, it has to get warmed up, and we've only been riding for like 2 minutes, so so amazing. I love bouncing it off the rev limiter. It's just how I like to ride it. And especially when you get into a street that has walls on each side and then you bounce it off the rev limiter, it just sounds amazing, man. I'm definitely going to miss this bike, and I just had so many great memories. End of March, I rode this bike to half marathon and I finished it.
and rode it back. It was 3 hours in total of just riding. I also had a night where to the same place I rode the bike. There was a music festival. I was like at the music festival for like 5 hours, maybe more, 7 hours. I don't even remember. Then I rode back same day, sleep deprived. It was crazy. I had my armor on. You can see I'm not really all the gear all the time guy, as is obvious because of my my Crocs and everything. I've said it before in the review, but this bike is just so amazingly simple. There's nothing complicated. Everything works. It just sounds so great. The engine is simple. Everything's simple. What more could you ask for? Alright, so let's turn it around right here. So amazing. And one thing that is really annoying is the 4-speed, I guess, of this bike. Sometimes when you're in second, you want to feel like you want to downshift into first, but it's really scary because the gear ratios are totally different. And then if you're entering a roundabout and you're shifting from second to first of all, there's neutral there, so you kind of get confused. Second of all, it's just really not a fun experience to have that sort of engine braking. Yeah, it's just not fun. One thing that I didn't really talk about in the video is just how cheap this bike is. I mean, it's definitely expensive for a 125cc that can't even go, you know, above 100 kilometers an hour, but it's definitely extremely cheap for such a unique bike and such a cool bike with so many cool features. Like the LCD display or red brake calipers, stuff like that. And I truly think that if you can get one of these used, like mine is in like perfect working order, it's really cheap. If you could get mine, you'd be so happy. I truly wish today was dry so that I could actually, you know, like record a proper video, but the guy's coming to pick it up right now, and I'm kind of ready to say goodbye to it, sadly. As much as I like the small form factor of this bike and how you can drive it on the side, ride it on the sidewalk and nobody cares, and you know, at some point you kind of just want a bigger bike. There are definitely some people that I've seen that they've got a big bike and they've also got a Grom, but I don't have that bigger bike and I really want that experience, so that's the only reason why I'm selling it, really. Downshifts on this bike are just amazing. I love them. This was my first bike. I kind of wanted to start off, even though I have an A2 license, I wanted to start off on a smaller bike. First of all, because this one is really cool. Like, there's no other bike like this. If there was a 250cc or a 300cc that I could buy that has the character of this bike, then I'd get it. But I wanted to start on a smaller bike, and I'm really happy that I did. And it's just been a really cool experience to be able to own it. Okay, so that was my 10-month ownership overview of my 2016 Honda Grom. It's been really nice to own this bike and to be able to enjoy it and drive it around for the past year. If you're thinking about buying this bike and you watched the entire video, I think you know the answer. You should go out and get one. And I'm really thankful to have had the opportunity to own one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. All right, so I'll keep the voice recording going.